Hey, welcome back to another episode of Strange Wilderness. I'm Kevin Foster and I'm with my dog Loki. So I decided to take a trip up to Maine and spend about 2.5 weeks up there. And as someone once pointed out to me, not everything is Sasquatch related, but I had a lot of encounters and different things I stumbled across that told me that they were Bigfoot related. And I just want to let you know that I went to 3 different areas up in Maine. The first area is my favorite camping spot. I went to actually Lake Pemaquid Campground, which is a beautiful spot. It's a gorgeous lake. It's about 7 miles long. And we got there, we spent the night, pretty uneventful. And the next morning, we took a bike ride. And then we ended up going kayaking, and this is where the encounter happened. We ended up spending the morning exploring the island, 2 islands actually, and then from there we headed out and we went to this end of Lake Pemaquid, which is a very marshy area. And as we started kayaking over there, all of a sudden I heard all these splashes in the water. So we were in about 2 feet of water. I looked down, I didn't see any fish, I didn't see any frogs jumping around. So my next thought was, well, maybe acorns are falling into the water, because this kept happening. I mean, there was repetitive splashes in the water. So I finally realized that we weren't under a canopy of trees. We were in the pretty much wide open spaces of the lake. We were probably about 60 feet offshore. And all of a sudden I started hearing crashes coming through the brush. Like things were being thrown at us, and you could hear them hitting off the leaves and everything. And I kind of realized that rocks were being thrown at us. And eventually one actually bounced off the bow of the kayak, startled Loki here. And I started distinctly having the feeling that we were being watched, that something was in the woods and wasn't happy that we were there and was throwing things at us. So finally, after that rock hit the bow and bounced off the bow, I ended up turning around and hightailing it out of there. All right, come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Look. Come on. So that morning, the next morning, we ended up packing up and leaving the Camden area. From there we headed up to Bar Harbor, Maine. Beautiful area. Acadia National Park's up there. It's filled with swamps and ponds and lakes and mountains. And the first day that we were there, we ended up hiking one of the mountain areas, and I was pretty tired, so we ended up heading to the person's house that I was staying at, and he has a beautiful sun deck up on the second story of the house. And I was just sitting out there sunning, and all of a sudden I heard this huge crack, loud crack, and then a tree falling in the forest. So I thought to myself, wow, I've actually experienced a tree falling in the forest. And I pretty much didn't think anything of it, but I ran in the house and I was asking the person in there if they had heard the tree fall, and they said no, they had the air conditioner on in there and they didn't hear anything. So I ended up taking Loki and heading down the driveway and walking up his dirt road there to take Loki for a walk and smoke a cigar. I'm a cigar smoker. And when I got back to the house, walked in the house, and the person said to me, wow, he says, you're not going to believe this. He said, but there was another tree that fell. And I'm like, what? I said, a second tree fell? He says, yeah. And I said, well, that's kind of unusual. I mean, we were only gone for like 15, 20 minutes, and 2 trees fell within 20 minutes. Now, this person has pointed out to me that not everything is Sasquatch related, and I agree with that. things happen. You can't always say it's Bigfoot, you can't always say it's Sasquatch, but I've read a lot of stuff and similar things where Bigfoots do break trees, they do knock trees down in the forest, and I thought, wow, maybe this is Bigfoot related. So as you'll see now, I actually stepped out in the backyard and I found some pretty bizarre things. So take a look. Now you can see this tree was just recently snapped and broken. This is a fresh snap. And not 20 yards from it, this was just recently broken. And pulled down from where it was broken from the fallen tree. And you can see how close it is to the house. And not even leading away from this broken tree. I'm not sure if you can make it out, but there's some deep scuff marks leading away from it over to the neighbor's house. It's pretty strange. And I just found this too. A bent over tree limb. And here's another shot of the broken tree. And you can see that's a fresh break. And it was broken down. And in here is the swamp area. There's a huge swamp area back here. And the interesting thing was the following day I took Loki and we ended up going across the street. There's a big pond there. I forget the exact name of the pond, but it's beautiful. There's mountain ranges off just past the pond, and you can see the peaks and everything in the ridgeways. So we're hiking along the pond and I heard loons. Obviously there's loons on the pond. But there was this one particular loon call that was like very deep and it was off. It sounded like a loon, but it wasn't a loon. And I soon realized that this loon call was coming from past the pond up on a ridge of a mountaintop. And it was very deep. And like I said, it was completely off, but it sounded like a loon. And now I've heard that Bigfoots mimic creatures, mimic loons, owls, all kinds of things. And it was the middle of the day, and I just thought that was odd. Good. Morning. So I ended up having a beautiful time up in Bar Harbor in the Acadia National Park and all that. So the next part of my trip, I headed up to Machias, Maine, which is about three-quarters of the way up of Maine on the seacoast. And my son lives there. I was staying with my son. And the odd thing about that area was the strange thing I noticed was that the deer, lots of deer kept coming into the area. Some of them were large herds of like 20 deer. And I thought that was really odd because we're in a pretty populated area, a lot of houses around and everything. And it almost to me felt like the deer were being driven out of the woods. Now the house was right on the Machias River. And Machias River stretches for miles and miles up to northern Maine. So that morning, my son and I took off, and I spent the morning fishing with him. He had some good luck. He caught some fish. And after, we decided to take a hike. He knew an area on the Machias River where we could park the cars and head along the river. There was a beautiful trail that went along the Machias River. And we got probably 2 miles up the trail, and I found this tree structure. Now, yes, people could have built it. It could have been man-made, but it was just kind of strange the way it was put together. Now, I've read many reports and seen many pictures of other Bigfoots and Sasquatches building similar items and structures like this. So we ended up leaving there. We didn't even go 100 yards up the trail, and we discovered a abandoned camping area. There was a beautiful stone fireplace that was built. It still had a coffee pot sitting on top of it. There was a camping chair next to it that was completely crushed and pulverized into the ground. There was a tent across from this stove that had been like smushed down. There were tear marks in it. Unfortunately, I didn't get any pictures of this because the area that we were in was very overgrown with large spruce, and it was very dark, and the pictures really didn't come out that well. But I knew someone else up in Maine who the previous year had stumbled across a campsite like that too, that had been completely demolished. They actually found a cooler chained to a tree that had been completely ripped apart, and there were 2 kayaks sitting there. It was on a pond. There were 2 kayaks there, and he and his friend who were hiking through there ended up taking those kayaks. And they said the same thing, that this tent was completely smashed and just pulverized into the ground. They thought it might have been there for a year or so, but it kind of makes you wonder, did somebody get up in the middle of the night and just take off fearing for their life? Or did something come in there and drag them away and take them off? So these were some of the weird things that happened up in Maine on my 2.5-week vacation in 3 different locations. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you watch my other episodes. Thanks.